was 17 and I could drive a car, so I drove to Nashville and went to the old time picking parlor, and there was these guys sitting jamming. So I said, I'll listen to them play for a few minutes. I said, hey, can I play something with y'all? And they said, what do you play? I said, I play banjo. They said, sure. About 5 minutes in, Charley said, hey, I'm going to call my boss. He needs to hear you. And so I didn't know who he was. I didn't know his name. I didn't know his boss's name. I didn't know who his boss was. So he went and got on the phone. 20 minutes later, in walked Roy Acuff. and he said, Charley, he said, oh, and so Charley introduced me to him, and he said, what are you doing tonight? I said, I just moved to town. And he said, well, come play on the Grand Ole Opry with us tonight. When I got through playing that night, I'll remember he walked backstage. He said, James, come with me. And he walked me back. This is James McKinney. James, this is Mr. Hill. And he said, I want you to know that anytime James wants to come in, you always let him in the back door here. He always can come anytime. That set up my life. So that was like my first week of living in Nashville. So anytime I wasn't playing a gig that paid money and stuff, if I wasn't busy, I would go over and get backstage at the Grand Ole Opry and just listen to what they had to say and learn things.
This week's request comes from James McKinney. Aside from the whole music thing, I've been in IT in one form or another since 1996. And the one thing that I've learned in that time is that the overlap between music and computers is greater than many people might realize. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise to me when I learned that there were some really good musicians on staff when I started working at my current job about 10 years ago, James being one of them. But when I met James, I definitely did not expect to meet someone who had been good friends with Vassar Clemens, the virtuoso fiddle player who played with everyone, Jerry Garcia, Linda Ronstadt, Paul McCartney, and also on the Highway Call album by Dickie Betts. But beyond the fact that James and I had this 6 degree of separation thing, when we finally got a chance to play a bit together at a company outing, I was absolutely floored. James's mastery of the banjo is far beyond anything you could reasonably expect to find in the IT department of an insurance company. Seriously, guy's a beast. And James recommended Charley Collins and Friends.
I'm not your baby, I'm your man.
No, not that Charley Collins. Sorry. This Charley Collins was a member of the Smoky Mountain Boys, Roy Acuff's band. Basically the house band for the Grand Ole Opry. And this album also features brother Oswald on dobro, who's another of the Smoky Mountain Boys. Also a young Sam Bush on both fiddle and mandolin. And James himself on banjo. But they misspelled his name on the album. Worse yet, they misspelled Charley Collins' name on the album. It's supposed to be IE. This will be the first time that the requester appears on the album they requested, which I'm very excited about. This will also be the first time I've heard James on an album, that I know of anyway. He's been at this a while. But beyond that, this will also be my first time spending some time with Bluegrass that predates like Newgrass Revival and the folks they played with, right? Jerry Douglas, John Cowan, Bela Fleck, Tony Rice, Edgar Meyer, that group. Well, and Sam Bush for that matter. And for those of you that have never spent time with the genre, let me see if I can put it into some context for you. When you hear Bluegrass, it sounds a bit old-timey, right? But the truth of the matter is, it's only been around since the 1940s. It was started by Bill Monroe. Think of it like this. Bluegrass is basically the bebop of country music. It's where all the best musicians get to show off their virtuosity. Started about the same time as bebop too. In other words, if you're a musician or a music fan of any stripe, there's a lot to like about Bluegrass. Anyway, how about I let James tell you guys another story while I give Charley Collins and Friends a quick spin.
The bass player, he's been dead a long time, but his father was the most famous bass player in Nashville. And then he became, after his father passed away, he became an incredible, one of the best acoustic upright players, his bassist. So listen to his timing and his slap. He had an incredible, nice feel to all of his playing. And the timing thing. So when we're playing something in Bluegrass that Bill Monroe came up with, is that the chop, if anybody's doing the offbeat, the pop, pop, pop offbeat, you come in just like about 4 seconds early. but you don't really speed up. The chop does that early, and maybe the guy playing lead might play a little on certain phrases, may play a little faster, but then it goes right back to the stable. So the bass is playing the complete, always the same, never rushing, never doing any anticipation. Just the mandolin chop or the banjo chop or the fiddle if it does a shuffle chop. Yeah. It's the tension between two players not being perfectly, one of them being in front of the other or behind, doesn't matter which one's out front, creates this tension that is exciting. And it breathes, it comes in and out, in and out.
Few thoughts on the first listen to Charley Collins and Friends. First, this is all 100% string band music, no percussion at all. High lonesome vocals, guitars, banjo, mandolin, dobro, and fiddle to play the melodies and improvise. And to keep time, the bass player plays quarter notes plus a chop from the mandolin on the upbeats. Also, this album isn't entirely bluegrass. There are a few tunes on here that are old-time Appalachian country music, like from the days when country and western were still distinctly different. Carter family style. If you've ever heard the soundtrack to Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, then you know the kind of music I'm talking about. Something else I've noticed. I've never heard a more clear connection from bluegrass to Celtic music before. There are a couple of songs on this album that if you added like a bowron or a cantor, it wouldn't sound out of place in an Irish country pub. Right, in fact, you can hear it right away on the first track, Fisher's Hornpipe. After a banjo intro from Vic Jordan, Charley Collins on mandolin plays a very Celtic sounding melody, repeated by Sam Bush on fiddle. Now tell me that doesn't make you want a pint of Guinness. Love Come Home adds some vocals. The standout thing for me on this track is the inclusion of the flat 7 chord in the chord changes, giving the tune a more bluesy or more dominant feel. Plus the dobro and fiddle breaks from Brother Oswald and Charley Collins, both very musical. Next is another instrumental called Big Mon, where James makes his first appearance. Right after the melody is stated, they let him loose and he plays these inventive chromatic runs that I just love. Followed by mandolin, fiddle solos, both played by Charley Collins. The guy can play. And the next is the very speedy John Hardy. Don't panic, melody, not that John Hardy. It's just the name of the song. Collins on guitar and James on banjo trade off all through this one. And James ends his solo like this. Dang, son! Fiddle feature next, Possum and Taters. A bit slower than John Hardy, but the structure again is Charley and James trading off, with Charley on both fiddle and mandolin again. Yeah, a lot of these instrumentals just feel like friends getting around to jam. I love that. When I played this album in the car and it got to Mother Prays in Her Sleep, Emily said, "Well, that's creepy." My mother prays so loud in her sleep. The song form is interesting though. 19 bars waltz time broken into 5, 5, 5, and 4. Side 2 starts with another old-timey country waltz. Somebody Loves You. Yeah, but the best part of this song is the penultimate verse. It goes like, somebody came to see me. Somebody came last night. Somebody asked me to marry. Of course I said all right. Of course. Rye Straw is an Irish trad-sounding bluegrass tune with the melody played on mandolin all throughout. No breaks, no solos. Interesting piece with unintuitive changes and even a bit of syncopation in the middle. Rolling in My Sweet Baby's Arms is very much a bluegrass standard, originally recorded by Flatt and Scruggs in 1951. Lay round and shake till the bells ring, come back and roll in the sweet baby's arms. But since covered by everyone from Buck Owens to Leon Russell to Tom Petty. Hey, I'll lay around the shack till the bell train comes back. I'm gonna roll in my sweet baby's arms. Probably not surprise you to learn that this is much closer to the Flatt and Scruggs version than the Tom Petty version. And speaking of standards, I don't think there's another more well-known bluegrass tune than Orange Blossom Special. Believe me, you've heard it before even if you don't know it. When you think of bluegrass fiddle, you're thinking of Orange Blossom Special. Charley Collins does an impressive job with this one too. It's a tough tune to play. A Precious Jewel is another string band country waltz, with the standout feature being its uneven song form again. Man, there's a lot of weird things you need to know about phrasing if you want to play this music.
More precious than diamonds, more precious than pearls.
One last instrumental to close the album, Bill Cheatham. Strong Celtic vibes in the melody again, played by Charley Collins on fiddle. James takes another impressive break, then Charley Collins on mandolin, then fiddle again to end the album. For me personally, I find myself enjoying the instrumental tracks more than the vocal ones, and the bluegrass ones more than the old-timey country ones. That being said, I enjoy both a heck of a lot more than many of the things I've heard bearing the label of country music. I also find myself really dwelling on the way this music is structured and executed, and how to approach something like competency in performing this kind of music, which is something I definitely lack at the moment. So, time for me to woodshed a bit, while we hear a bit more from James.
Pete Kirby, his stage name was Bashful Brother Oswald, and he played the dobro, so he's on a couple of the songs that playing dobro, and he also played frailing banjo, but I don't think there's any frailing on there. But of this song that we played, I learned that tune from him, and then I never heard it. I went in, played, and I never heard it till years later. I didn't even get a copy of it because I had moved away from Nashville and moved out to Texas and was working for Ross Perot at the time doing computer stuff, and I just never ran into him, seeing him. And then finally, years later, I got a copy of it, and wow, I was like, oh, I forgot all about this. That's really fun.
Phrasing and timing. I'm going to use this time to evangelize a bit about why you should learn and listen to bluegrass if you're a musician or someone interested in music. From the point of view of an improviser, the thing about bluegrass in general that's so deceptive is how bluegrass songs are harmonically constructed. Yes, the changes are simple, but like with blues, which is also simple, if all you do is run scales, I mean, yes, it'll work, but you're not going to sound as good as you could. But if, like me, you spent a lifetime learning jazz and blues and rock, and you try and construct a solo over bluegrass changes, you're going to quickly discover that your musical instincts will fail you utterly. And in part, this has to do with phrasing. In most blues, jazz, and rock, the song form ends in such a way that the downbeat at the start of the next form also serves as a resolution to the end of the previous one. Play that 5 chord before you hit the 1 of the next downbeat. That means that every chorus, every song form ends with a bit of tension. But in bluegrass, the resolution happens right at the end of the form, not at the beginning of the next. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this affects the entire way you have to think about improvisation, not just the last bar of the form. Look, when you're soloing in a blues context, for example, you build up your story so that it ends on a tense or a high note, giving you the opportunity to either hand it off to the singer, the next soloist, or to continue on building on it yourself. But in bluegrass, every chorus is self-contained. You have to be more concise, and the phrasing has to be such that the end of the form is a period, not an ellipsis. That's part of it anyway. The other part is timing. The chop that I mentioned in the rhythm pattern, that lands on the upbeats. It serves roughly the same function as the skank does in reggae. So in bluegrass, if we count 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to hit that chop on the ands. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing with reggae, but it's much slower. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But instead of playing it just behind the beat like you would in reggae, in bluegrass you have to anticipate, play it just ahead of the beat. Plus the 16th note subdivisions in bluegrass are ever so slightly swung. All of this is especially important from the banjo point of view, not just for improvising, but also because their comping pattern is a rolling 16th note figure, meaning your banjo rolls have to be timed such that they don't flam with the chop and they don't drag behind the soloist. And the amount of time you have to dedicate to keeping such immaculate time, well, it's not nothing. And let me tell you, James has got all of that, the phrasing and the timing. And even though Charley Collins and Friends came out 49 years ago, and he'll tell you he's gotten a lot better since, well, he had it then too. Look, if you're already a fan of bluegrass or old-timey Appalachian country, you're going to like this album already. But for those of you that would never consider listening to either, maybe give Charley Collins and Friends a spin and put your musician's ears on, because there's a lot of impressive things going on here. Plus, James is really good. So my final thoughts, on a scale of 1 to 10, I give Charley Collins and Friends 35 strings. 4 for bass, 4 for fiddle, 5 for banjo, 6 for guitar, 6 for dobro, 8 for mandolin, plus 2 sets of vocal cords. See you next week.